Almost immediately after the end of the Second World War, both the US and several Western European security services cooperated to create several stay-behind networks. Their purpose was to conduct clandestine and guerrilla warfare operations to resist in the event of an invasion by the USSR and their eastern allies. The existence of these networks was officially confirmed in November of 1990 by the Italian Prime Minister Giulio Andreotti. This is how the general public learned about the Italian stay-behind operation, known as Gladio, but which is a name that has become synonymous with the whole concept of anti-communist stay-behind operations. In our previous episode on the origins of Gladio, we covered the beginnings of the program with a deep dive into the former Axis powers of Italy and Germany. Well, West Germany. We also discussed how some of these clandestine organizations may have been involved in criminal activities, including state-sponsored terrorism. But we'll drag into those murky waters in a future episode. I'm your host David, and today we're going to kick off a grand tour, sans Jeremy Clarkson or Richard Hammond of course, to learn more about the creation of Gladio equivalent organizations in Western Europe and beyond. This is the Cold War. With all the research and editing and shooting we do, it's hard to find time for self-improvement, so I was happy when I discovered the sponsor of this video, Blinkist. Blinkist condenses thousands of popular modern books into 15-minute audios so that you can then listen to them podcast style. It allows me to save time and still continue learning without making sacrifices in other areas of my life. I use it when I'm walking my dog or doing chores around the house. Being able to access all Blinkist titles while offline makes my hikes more fun. Our viewers will surely enjoy The Spy and the Traitor by Ben McIntyre, telling one of the greatest espionage stories of the Cold War, that of Oleg Gordievsky, the Soviet double agent whose efforts contributed to the end of the Cold War, while Catherine Belton's Putin's People is a shocking account of the corruption and political schemes that swirl around Russia's infamous president, Vladimir Putin, and his close inner circle. You'll love the newest addition to Blinkist. Premium subscribers get 65% off the regular retail prices of the full-length audiobook. So what are you waiting for? The first 100 people to go to Blinkist.com/coldwar get unlimited access for 1 week to try it out. You'll also get 25% off when you subscribe to the full membership. By the early 1950s, every NATO member state had its own local version of Gladio, coordinated by the Clandestine Planning Committee. Interestingly, however, the concept was not a prerogative of NATO members. Even neutral countries, not tied to any military alliance with the US or the West, developed their own clandestine anti-Soviet resistance movements. Now, if you think about the word neutrality, you're probably picturing Switzerland. The Alpine state has a history of neutrality dating back to the Reformation, and has not participated in a foreign war since officially proclaiming its neutrality in 1815. Nonetheless, the Swiss government still had fears of an invasion by the Red Army and its allies in the post-Second World War period, and as such, developed plans to combat and resist that invasion. A first doctrine considered by the government was that of total partisan warfare, conducted by the entire population. This approach, commonly associated with the Swiss defense strategy, was later made popular by Major Hans von Dach in his 1957 manual, Total Resistance. The Swiss General Staff eventually opted for a plan which emphasized conventional defensive military action. Should that fail, however, the Swiss government was to relocate to the Irish Republic and from there maintain regular contact with a pre-established clandestine network in Switzerland. The Swiss version of Gladio was initially called Special Service, then later renamed P-26. This stay-behind organization consisted of 3 levels. The first, at the top, a small group of senior army officers responsible for administration and training. The second level was made up of trusted persons, spread across Switzerland and in charge of recruitment. The third part was made up of the resistance fighters themselves, who had authority to recruit further personnel. The ideal P-26 member would have been a balanced, low-profile, stress-resistant, and trustworthy individual. Members were to have a regular job, but one that could easily provide excuses for frequent absences to attend training camps. Once enrolled, the members were trained in sabotage, guerrilla, and exfiltration tactics. These programs were developed closely with the help of the British Special Air Service, and some of P-26 cadres even trained in Great Britain. After completing boot camp, the P-26 recruits were assigned to their units in one of 80 locations spread across the country. Each unit consisted of 6 to 10 members, and each unit was split into 2 cells, an active cell and a sleeper cell. In case of capture or elimination of the active cell, the sleeper cell would then kick into action. Interesting detail here, the active cells had no knowledge of the identities, whereabouts, or sometimes even the existence of the sleeper cells. In case of, shall we say, forceful interrogation, active operatives would therefore not be able to reveal the details on their sleeper colleagues. These cells typically included a communications expert, a courier, and a demolitions specialist. They would be coordinated by an operational chief, who I bet loved it when a plan came together. Finally, as was the case with Italian Gladio, each unit would have access to a cache of weapons, explosives, radios, and other specialized equipment. And as was the case with Gladio, the P-26 network was revealed to the public following a parliamentary inquiry in November of 1990. Unlike in other European countries, however, the inquiry found no reason to believe that P-26 had been involved in illegal activities. Even the involvement of British special forces in the training arrangement was not deemed a violation of Swiss neutrality. Okay, so now we're going to move slightly east to Switzerland's neighbor. No, not Liechtenstein. I mean Austria. As we discussed in our episode on Austria's post-war transition, the country was one of the hottest spots of the Cold War in Europe due to its proximity to the Iron Curtain and its neutrality, which allowed easier operations for intelligence services from both sides of the ideological divide. The tangible threat of a Soviet re-invasion, however, prompted right-wing activists Theodor Susek and Hugo Rossner to create a partisan network almost immediately after the end of the war. The conspiracy was unveiled in 1947, and the two leaders declared on trial that they had been carrying out their operation with the full knowledge and support of the US and British occupying powers. Susek and Rossner were sentenced to death, but were both later pardoned. The idea to establish a clandestine anti-Soviet network was resuscitated following the general strikes in October 1950. Communist-led industrial action eventually failed to gain popular support, but worried the Austrian government enough that they decided to cooperate with the US, UK, and French security services to set up a local Gladio of their own. The main local coordinator was Social Democrat MP and later Minister of the Interior, Franz Olah, who had been one of the main opponents of the strikes. Olah's organization recruited about 2,000 members, operating under the codename Austrian Association of Hiking, Sports and Society, or OWSGV, which just makes me wonder, what if someone tried to join with a genuine interest in alpine trails and sports, and instead found themselves training on how to blow up Soviet tanks? Now, speaking of blowing things up, one of the main topics in the OWSGV training curriculum was, in fact, how to use modern plastic explosives. Olah even admitted having a small arsenal in his office, always at the ready, because, you'd never know when you might need to blow something up, like a tank, or the incoming mail, or maybe even just that guy down the hall that you just know doesn't wash his hands after using the washroom. But anyway, the existence of the OWSGV was of course a well-guarded secret until 1996 at least. That's when a Boston Globe article revealed the existence of a CIA arms cache in Austria. The Austrian Chancellor Franz Vranitzky denied any knowledge of the stay-behind plans, which may have actually been true. US State Department spokesman Nicola Burns admitted that following the foundation of OWSGV, successive Washington administrations simply decided not to talk to the Austrian government about it. Okay, now we're going to move into Northern Europe to review the clandestine networks that were set up in neutral Sweden and Finland. The operations here, by the way, as well as in the NATO members of Norway and Denmark, were set up by CIA agent William Colby. During the Second World War, Colby had served with the OSS in Norway, which is why he had been picked for this mission by Jerry Miller, Deputy Chief of CIA's Western European Division, and Lou Shearer, the head of the Scandinavian branch. In April of 1951, Kolbe was posted to Stockholm posing as a junior political attaché at the US Embassy. From there, Kolbe set to work immediately. In Norway and Denmark, he organized the local Gladios with the open support of NATO and the local governments. But in neutral Sweden and Finland, the situation was trickier, and Kolbe had to act alone with only the unofficial help of local military and civilian volunteers. Especially in Finland, the CIA had to move with extreme caution. First of all, a local stay-behind network had already sprung up as early as October 1944, shortly after the end of the continuation war against the USSR. Army officers, acting independently, took to hiding weapons and ammunition to resist a feared Soviet occupation. One of them was the legendary Lauri Torni, already familiar to fans of the metal band Sabaton as the Soldier of Three Armies. For those of you who may not know, Torni fought communism first with the Finnish army, then as a Waffen-SS captain. He then later re-emerged as a US Green Beret captain, Larry Thorne, serving in Vietnam. The clandestine activities of Torni and other high-ranking officers had been exposed in 1945 by the Communist Minister of the Interior and the Valpo, the state police. This became known as the scandal of the weapons cache case. Moreover, Finland and the USSR were tied by the Agreement of Friendship, Cooperation, and Mutual Assistance of April 1948. Kolbe's superior made it clear that any operations carried out in Finland had to be kept extremely quiet to prevent any provocation of the Soviet Union. In his memoirs, William Kolbe explained his working method and how he worked to maintain the utmost secrecy. To be clear, however, he never disclosed whether this was applied to Sweden, Finland, or both. Kolbe would typically start by recruiting a member of the local secret services, a local army officer, and a civilian. The officer and the intelligence agent would be in charge of recruiting and training further operatives. The civilian would take care of psychological warfare operations. These included activities such as curating a library of local literature and music as a means to keep up morale after a Soviet occupation. In his autobiography, Kolbe admitted to building a second-tier clandestine network without the knowledge nor cooperation of the recruited locals. Some of these assets were US citizens, many of Scandinavian descent. They were journalists, academics, or business owners, people whose day job could justify their frequent movements within Sweden and Finland, mainly to distribute and hide radio equipment. This second-tier network would act as a backup organization in case the first local Gladio equivalent was dispersed for any reason. In the summer of 1953, Kolbe was transferred to Rome, so the running of the stay-behind organization in Sweden was left in the hands of the domestic security police, the Säkerhetspolis, or SAPO. When SAPO identified and vetted a potential recruit, the new agent was sent to be trained in a farm just outside Eton in England. According to one of these recruits, the British Secret Services and Special Forces were masters in the art of running a secret resistance network. Following a script we've heard many times now, the Swedish and Finnish stay-behind networks were exposed in 1990. In Sweden, Chief of Staff General Bengt Gustafsson openly admitted to its existence. And again, allegations appeared in the press that the secret army had pursued domestic goals by criminal means. The most serious allegation was that the network had been involved in the assassination of Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme in 1986, but this is an allegation which remains unfounded. In Finland, the presence of a Gladio was dismissed by Defense Minister Elizabeth Rehn as a fairy tale, or at least an incredible story of which I know nothing. But the big reveal was confirmed by former CIA Chief of Station in Helsinki, Dave Whipple. Whipple confirmed the importance of maintaining a strong sleeper army in a country that shared such an extended border with the USSR. The CIA agent did not disclose the size of the organization, but he did admit the vast presence of regular armed forces personnel whose duty was also to counter a potential increase in power of the local Communist Party. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Our tour of the vast European stay-behind networks will continue in future episodes, as we still have to cover how clandestine guerrilla armies were set up in France, Southern Europe, and even Luxembourg. To make sure you don't miss that and all of our future episodes, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and have clandestinely recruited the bell button. Please remember that your financial assistance is greatly appreciated in helping us bring you new content. So please consider joining our Patreon at www.patreon.com/thecoldwar. This is the Cold War channel, and don't forget, the trouble with the Cold War is that it doesn't take too long before it gets heated.